hope that you had a great Thanksgiving break and are ready to nail out these next 3 weeks before we have our Christmas break. Hope you're staying healthy and well and that you guys are taking care of yourself. We're starting a new book. It is by Margaret Peterson Haddix. It is the first book in a series of 8. We're going to only read the first one. And it's called Among the Hidden, and it has received several awards. This one is of kind of the closest I can think of genre-wise is possibly science fiction, but it's not robots. It's not that kind of science fiction. It's about future things that might later on with some of the things in this book might be futuristic. So that's kind of why I would classify this as science fiction, because of the futuristic implications that are in here. So it's called Among the Hidden, and let's begin. Chapter 1. He saw the first tree shudder and fall, far off in the distance. We're going to read chapter 1 and 2, by the way. Then he heard his mother call out the kitchen window, "Luke, inside now!" He had never disobeyed the order to hide. Even as a toddler, barely able to walk in the backyard's tall grass, he had somehow understood the fear in his mother's voice. But on this day, the day they began taking the woods away, he hesitated. He took one extra breath of fresh air, scented with clover and honeysuckle, and coming from far away, pine smoke. He laid his hoe down gently and savored one last moment of feeling warm soil beneath his bare feet. He reminded himself, "I will never be allowed outside again. Never again, as long as I live." He turned and walked into the house as silently as a shadow. And you're going to kind of find out about that word, shadow, as we continue to read. "Why?" he asked at the supper table that night. It wasn't a common question in the Garner house. There are plenty of hows. How much rain did the backfield get? How's the planting going? Even what'd Matthew do with the 5/16 wrench? What's Dad going to do about that busted tire? But why wasn't considered much worth asking. Luke asked again, "Why did you have to sell the woods?" Luke's dad humphed and paused in the midst of shoveling a forkful of boiled potatoes into his mouth. "Told you before, we didn't have a choice. Government wanted it. You can't tell the government no." Mother came over and gave Luke's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before turning back to the stove. They had defied the government once with Luke, and that had taken all the defiance they had in them, maybe more. "We wouldn't have sold the woods if we hadn't had to," she said, ladling out thick tomatoey soup. "The government didn't ask us if we wanted houses there." She pursed her lips as she slid the bowls of soup onto the table. "But the government's not going to live in the houses," Luke protested. At 12, he knew better, but sometimes still pictured the government as a very mean, big, fat person 2 or 3 times as tall as an ordinary man, who went around yelling at people, "Not allowed!" and "Stop that!" And it was because of the way his parents and older brothers talked. "Government won't let us plant corn there again. Government's keeping the prices down. Government's not going to like this crop." "Probably some of the people who live in those houses will be government workers," Mother said. "It'll all be city people." If he had been allowed, Luke would have gone over to the kitchen window and peered out at the woods, trying for the umpteenth time to picture rows and rows of houses, where the firs and maples and oaks now stood, or had stood. Luke knew from a sneak peek right before supper that half the trees were now toppled. Some already lay on the ground. Some hung at weird angles from their former lofty positions in the sky. Their absence made everything look different, like a fresh haircut exposing a band of untanned skin on the forehead. Even from deep inside the kitchen, Luke could tell the trees were missing because everything was brighter, more open, scarier. "And then, when those people move in, I have to stay away from the windows?" Luke asked, though he knew the answer. The question made Dad explode. He slammed his hand down on the table. "Then you gotta stay away now. Everybody and his brother is going to be tramping around back there to see what's going on. They see you." He waved his fork violently. Luke wasn't sure what the gesture meant, but he knew it wasn't good. No one had ever told him exactly what would happen if anyone saw him. Death? Death was what happened to the runt pigs who got stepped on by their stronger brothers and sisters. Death was a fly that stopped buzzing when the swatter hit it. He had a hard time thinking about himself in connection with the smashed fly or the dead pig, gone stiff in the sun. It made his stomach feel funny even trying. I don't think it's fair we've got to do Luke's chores now, Luke's other brother Mark grumbled. Can't he go outside some, maybe at night? Luke waited hopefully for the answer, but Dad just said no, without looking up. It's not fair, Mark said again. Mark was the second son, the lucky second. Luke thought when he was feeling sorry for himself, Mark was 2 years older than Luke and barely a year younger than Matthew, the oldest. Matthew and Mark were easily recognizable as brothers, with their dark hair and chiseled faces. Luke was fairer, smaller boned, and softer looking. He often wondered if he would ever look tougher like them. Somehow he didn't think so. Luke didn't do nothing nohow, Matthew jeered. We won't miss his work at all. It's not my fault, Luke protested. I would help more if... Mother laid her hands on his shoulders again. Hush, all of you, she said. Luke will do what he can. He always has. The sound of tires on their gravel driveway came through the open window. Now who? Dad started. Luke knew the rest of the sentence. Who could that be? Why were they bothering him now? His first chance all day to sit down. It was a question Luke always heard at the end of from the other side of the door. Today, skittish because of the woods coming down, he scrambled up faster than usual, dashing for the door to the back stairs. He knew without watching that Mother would take his plate from the table and hide it in the cupboard, would slide his chair back into the corner so it looked like an unneeded spare. In 3 seconds, she would hide all the evidence that Luke existed, just in time to step to the door and offer a weary smile to the fertilizer salesman or the government or inspector or whomever else had come to interrupt their supper. I forgot to read the back of the book. I'm going to do that real quick before I go on to chapter 2. So let me mark my spot. All right. Luke had never been to school, so we know Luke is 12. He's never had a birthday party or gone to a friend's house for an overnight. In fact, Luke has never had a friend. Don't you find that interesting? And especially with what we just read in chapter 1. Luke is one of the shadow children. We read, remember I kind of said something about the word shadow. A third child forbidden. What does that mean? Against the law by the population police. So what does that mean? You were allowed in where Luke was living to only have 2 children. If you ever had more than 2 children, you broke the law and there would be consequences. Luke was one of the shadow children. That's what they called the third children. A third child forbidden by the population police. He lived his entire life in hiding. That's why all that was going on. He's living in hiding. And now, with a new housing development, meaning a neighborhood, replacing the woods next to his family's farm, he is no longer even allowed to go outside. Then one day Luke sees a girl's face in the window of a house where he knows 2 other children already live. So he's a shadow child, meaning illegal. He sees a face of a girl in another house and knows they have 2 children. So I wonder what he's thinking about that. Sees a girl's face in the window of the house where he knows 2 other children already live. Finally, he's met a shadow child like himself. Jen is willing to risk everything to come out of the shadows, meaning to come out of hiding. Does Luke dare to become involved in her dangerous plan? Can he afford not to? All right, now we're going back to chapter 2. There was a law against Luke, so it's going to give us a little bit more details. Not him personally, everyone like him. Kids who were born after their parents already had 2 babies. Actually, Luke didn't know if there was anyone else like him. He wasn't supposed to exist. Maybe he was the only one. They did things to women after they had their second baby so they wouldn't have any more. And if there was a mistake, and a woman got pregnant anyway, she was supposed to get rid of it. That was how Mother had explained it years ago. The first and only time Luke had asked why he had to hide. He had been 6 years old. Before that, he had thought only very little children had to stay out of sight. He had thought as soon as he was as old as Matthew and Mark, he would get to go around like they did, riding to the backfield and even into town with Dad, hanging their heads and arms out the pickup window. He had thought as soon as he got as old as Matthew and Mark, he could play in the front yard and kick the ball out into the road if he wanted. He had thought as soon as he got as old as Matthew and Mark, he could go to school. They complained about it, whining, "Geez, we got to do homework, and who cares about spelling?" But they also talked about games at recess and friends who shared candy at lunchtime or loaned them pocket knives to carve with. Somehow Luke never got as old as Matthew and Mark. The day of his 6th birthday, Mother baked a cake, a special one with raspberry jam dripping down the sides. At supper that night, she put 6 candles on the top and placed it in front of Luke and said, "Make a wish." Staring at the ring of candles, proud that the number of his years finally made a ring all around the cake, Luke suddenly remembered another cake, another ring of 6 candles. Mark's. He remembered Mark's 6th birthday. He remembered it because even with the cake in front of him, Mark had been whining. "But I want a party. Robert Joe had a party for his birthday. He got to have 3 friends over." Mother had said, "Shh," and looked from Mark to Luke, saying something with her eyes that Luke didn't understand. Startled by the memory, Luke let out his breath. 2 of his candles flickered and 1 went out. Matthew and Mark laughed. "You ain't getting that wish," Mark said. "Baby can't even blow out candles." Luke wanted to cry. He had forgotten even to make a wish, and if he hadn't been surprised, he would have been able to blow out all 6 candles. He knew he could have, and then he would have gotten, he didn't know, a chance to ride to town in the pickup truck, a chance to play in the front yard, a chance to go to school. Instead, all he had was a strange memory that couldn't be right. Surely Luke was thinking about Mark's 7th birthday, or maybe his 8th. Mark couldn't have known Robert Joe when he was 6, because he would have been hiding too, then, like Luke. Luke thought about it for 3 days. He trailed along behind his mother as she hung out wash on the line, made strawberry preserves, scrubbed the bathroom floor. Several times he started to ask, "How old do I have to be before people can see me?" But something stopped him every time. Finally, on the 4th day, after Dad, Matthew, and Mark scraped back their chairs from the breakfast table and headed out to the barn, Luke crouched by the kitchen side window, one he wasn't supposed to look out because people driving by might catch a glimpse of his face. He tilted his head to the side and raised up just enough that his left eye was above the level of the windowsill. He watched Matthew and Mark running in the sunlight, the tops of their hog boots thumping against their knees. They were in full sight of the whole world, it seemed, and they didn't care. They were racing to the front door of the barn, not the side one off the backyard like Luke always had to use, because it was hidden from the road. Luke turned around and slid to the floor out of sight. "Matthew and Mark never had to hide, did they?" he asked. Luke's mother was scrubbing the remains of scrambled eggs out of the skillet. She turned her head and looked at him carefully. "No," she said. "Then why do I?" She dried her hands and left the sink, something Luke had almost never seen her do. If there were still dirty dishes left to be washed, she crouched beside him and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Oh, Lukey, do you really need to know? Isn't it enough to know that things are just different for you?" He thought about that. Mother was always saying he was the only one who would ever sit on her lap and cuddle. She still read bedtime stories to him, and he knew Matthew and Mark thought that was sissified. Was that what she meant? But he was just younger. He would grow up. Wouldn't he be like them then? With unusual stubbornness, Luke insisted, "I want to know why I'm different. I want to know why I have to hide." So Mother told him. Later he wished he asked more questions, but at the time it was all he could do to listen to what she told him. He felt like he was drowning in the flow of her words. "It just happened," she said. "You just happened. and we wanted you. I wouldn't even let your dad talk about getting rid of you." Luke pictured himself as a baby, left in a cardboard box by the side of the road somewhere, the way Dad said people used to do with kittens back when people were allowed to have pets. So did you catch that? You're not only allowed to only have 2 kids in this society he's living in, you can have no pets. But maybe that wasn't what Mother meant. The population law hadn't been around long then, and I always wanted lots of kids. Getting pregnant with you was like a miracle. I thought the government would get over their foolishness, maybe even by the time you were born, and then I would have a new baby to show everyone. But you didn't, Luke managed to say. You hid me. His voice sounded strangely hoarse, like it belonged to someone else. Mother nodded. Once I started showing, meaning her pregnant tummy, I didn't go anywhere. That wasn't hard to do. Where do I go? Anyway, I didn't let Matthew and Mark leave the farm for fear they would say something. I didn't even say anything about you in the letters to my mother and sister. I wasn't really scared then. It was just superstition. I didn't want to brag. I thought I would go to the hospital to give birth. I wasn't going to keep you a secret forever. But then what? Luke asked. His mother wouldn't look at him. Then they started running all that on television about the population police. How the population police had ways of finding out everything. How they would do anything to enforce the population law. What does that mean, limiting families to 2 kids? Luke glanced toward the hulking television in the living room. He wasn't allowed to watch it. Was that why? And your dad started hearing rumors in towns about other babies. Luke shivered. Mother was looking far off into the distance to where the rows of new corn plants met the horizon. I always wanted a John too, she said. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lie on. But then I thank the Lord that I have you at least. And it's worked out, the hiding, hasn't it? The smile she offered him was wobbly. He felt he had to help her. Yes, he said. And somehow after that, he didn't mind hiding so much anymore. Who wanted to meet strangers anyway? Who wanted to go to school where if Matthew and Mark were to be believed, teachers yelled, and the other boys would double-cross you if you didn't watch out. He was special. He was a secret. He belonged at home, where his mother always let him have the first piece of apple pie because he was there and the other boys were away. Home, where he could cradle the new baby pigs in the barn, climb the trees at the edge of the woods, throw snowballs at the post of the clothesline. Home, where the backyard always beckoned, always safe and protected by the house and the barns and the woods, until they took the woods away.